So we're going to kick off our next, can you hear me at the back? Yes. We're going to kick off our next session, and as I say, this is going to feel slightly different. This is more of a chat, an informal chat, and I'm delighted that Bernie's here. I'll do an introduction in a moment, but just to say she's managed to fit us in a very busy schedule. So we're going to keep this relatively short, I think probably about 20 minutes, and there won't be time for questions now, but I'm sure if people have questions, sure. You can follow up with us, and we will make sure those questions get to Bernie. But this session is all about kind of innovation in shared services when it comes to public sector finance and fintech. And I'm delighted to be joined by Bernie Kelly, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the National Shared Services Office here in Ireland. Bernie was appointed as CEO at the NSSO in September 2023, so I'll ask you a little bit about how you found it in a moment. She's a senior leader with over 20 years' experience in operations and transformational leadership in shared services and finance in Ireland and Europe, Middle East and Africa. And as CEO at the NSSO, Bernie leads the provision of shared services of human resources, payroll administration and finance and accounting shared services administration to across kind of government departments and public service bodies across Ireland. Most recently, Bernie held the role of Assistant Secretary for Finance Management Shared Services, having joined the NSSO in 2017. She's held previously senior leadership roles in global multinationals, including Cambridge Diagnostics, Nortel Networks and Avaya. So, first of all, Bernie, lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us. We have been having a whole kind of day on fintech so far, but let's kind of step back a little bit. And could you just tell us a little bit about the NSSO and what it does?
Sure. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you all this afternoon. And apologies, I wasn't available earlier this morning to join you. So I do feel at a slight disadvantage coming in at a late stage, although I did join for some of your previous section actually, and there's some very common themes in terms of our own experiences in rolling out shared services across government departments. So I'm delighted to be here for the Fireside Chat. I'm even more delighted there's no fire because it's certainly hot enough up here under the lights. So, but as you said, I'm a relatively new appointee as the Chief Executive Officer for the National Shared Services Office. And a little bit of background, you've probably already given the overview in terms of what we do, and maybe some of the people in the room may be well aware already, or indeed some of our customers or our client departments are here with us. But as you said, the Shared Services Office, we provide human resources, payroll and pension, finance and accounting administration services for all of central government departments, so 50 plus central government departments and public service bodies. The NSSO was born out of the economic downturn back in 2011, and as a common and proven business model, shared services for providing centralised and efficient shared services across government and indeed across the private sector also. It was put in place just for that reason, to provide lots of the common themes that I heard in your previous presentation, that value proposition. So we're here to provide those end-to-end services to our clients. As such, we've got a very diverse customer base. So as you can imagine, we serve from a HR perspective over 40,000, between 40,000 and 50,000 civil servants. We have in the region of 160,000 plus payees on the payroll side, which includes civil servants in employment and also pensioners, so therefore a very diverse group in terms of our client base. And our third service and most recent service that just went live in 2022 is our finance shared services. And within that, again, we've a very diverse group. We've gone live with the first 8 entities. We provide the finance services for the government department, and as such, in the context of what we're speaking today, we would also be the provide payments to, again, a diverse set of clients in terms of suppliers, including small, middle-size enterprises, funding, grant recipients, etc. So a full range of services there. I suppose the finance shared services remains one of the more strategic programs that we have underway in the Shared Services Office, being that we are still on the deployment path for that. We're going to do that in a number of waves. Wave 1, as I said, live. We're on the wave 2. When we bring the bodies and the departments on board for wave 2, we'll be 50% there in terms of the volume that we will have. And at full scale, when we get to wave 4, we will have, we'll be processing in the regions of multiples of billions of payments and multiple billions of transactions. It's a fairly large scale service. We do a lot.
Yeah, we do a lot. Definitely. And we were saying at one of our earlier sessions today, what is fintech? And kind of it can mean a lot of things to different people, but essentially it's how are you using innovative technology in the space of finance? So when it comes to that newest area that you cover, the finance kind of shared services, what do you see as being the biggest challenges when it comes to adopting new technologies across who you work with? But also, what are some of the benefits if you can do that? Yeah,
of course. So if you can, envisage, we've got over 31, in advance of this programme, there is in excess of 30 different finance systems and reporting systems across all of the government departments. And in that, you've got a diverse range of processes in terms of how we're processing, how we're paying, and how we're reporting. And that all has to be centralised again and reported. So in terms of the challenges of bringing that on board, in order to adopt the technology, we have got to change the fundamental processes end to end. So in terms of the transformation that's been delivered to the Finance Shared Services Programme, it brings it all. It brings a change in processes, it brings a change in system, and it brings a change in organisation, because obviously we're bringing a brand new service. So we've got it all, people, process and system. And we're doing that at a very large scale. So what we are doing is ultimately replacing those 31 different systems, replacing the different ways of doing that. We're bringing them on to one standard platform. So one standard technology platform, and in order to do that, we've got to standardise the processes end to end across those different departments, standardise the way we do things, but we've also got to integrate them in a system of very robust and strong controls, financial controls end to end. So irrespective of it being finance or any other type of process that we're trying to do, in terms of the modernisation of that, we're moving from, in some areas, very significant manual and still today very paper-based processes, moving them much more towards, that front-end procurement, so enabling e-procurement, enabling e-invoicing, enabling that integration right through, so procure to pay, order to cash, report to record, record to report, should I say. So all of that, and irrespective of the transformation that's involved, I suppose, it's the change impact that brings. And fundamentally, until you standardise those processes, as best we can do, the technology won't be the answer. The technology will be the enabler, but the change of the processes front end is something that we need. And change is difficult. We all know that. So it's all about engagement. It's about ensuring that we do that at the scale and the timeline that we can facilitate, and at the pace that each of the departments can come with us on that.
It's really interesting the way you put that, because I think that's come out definitely of our sessions, that you can't just digitalise a bad process.
Yeah.
And actually technology is almost the end point. You need to do
Correct.
all of that change first and transformation behind the scenes.
Yeah. Exactly. And not only that, I suppose it's not only in the finance piece, but we've seen that in all of our other services. I mean, we are, I suppose, as an office, a statutory office ourselves, the NSSO, we're only a very young office in comparison to the well-established departments across the civil service. We're only 6 years being established as an office in itself, but we're over 10 years providing HR and payroll services. And again, we're now at a point, you can imagine as a new organisation, in the first 5 years, imagine the development of the first 5 to 10 years that we all go through. We begin, we learn how to crawl, we learn how to walk, walk, we learn how to run, we develop, and then we adapt and we apply that in our learnings and our growth as we go forward. And I suppose that's where the NSSO is right now, with the 10 years of experience of running HR and payroll. We're at that point where we're really truly trying to integrate those processes so that we can actually evolve and we can deliver, but we can take advantage of the opportunities that the technology advancements that we have today, that we can evolve that service. And it's all about putting the customer at the centre, because the better service will be provided by enabling that technology. But I think some of the very key points that were made in your previous presentation is around that, again, we have a diverse set of client departments who all have a very diverse business needs themselves. We've a diverse set of customers, but also in the public service, we're here to deliver value, and there's that value concept, and that's what it's about. So that has to be the forefront to what we do.
And you mentioned there kind of embracing the new technologies and being in the right place to embrace the new technologies. To what extent do you think AI, kind of generative AI, is going to change the game? So both in terms of the benefits that it might bring, efficiencies and all of those kind of things, but also do you think the NSSO and others across the public sector are ready to manage the risks that will come with AI?
Yeah, well, I suppose, hasten with caution is what we would think in terms of generative AI. I mean, it's here to stay. We all hear about it every day in terms of its absolutely huge potentials, but also the great risks that come along with that. And definitely within the NSSO, we would be looking, obviously, where we can, and in line with government and the acts that recently passed within the EU, leveraging generative AI, all about streamlining our service. It's all about providing the value for the customer. And our customers and our users, are expecting us, and they're expecting to be able to interface with us and to do business with us through AI. So in other words, we'll be looking to leverage, for example, service management layers where we can, AI-enabled service management layers, where our customers can access, at any time, anywhere, in terms of any of the HR cases that we would have raised, multiple of HR cases, come in through AI, through that front end in terms of a service management layer, and leverage AI to figure out the easier answers that can be done very instantaneously, and they can get a response very quickly rather than going through a queue in a case. And also internally then, how we use that AI to streamline our own processes and make our day easier in terms of our staff and do that. So, ultimately that's our vision, is to come to that service management layer, ease of access. One of the biggest bugbears some of our customers have is in terms of how we log on to the systems that we currently have, and we recognise that. So, in the months ahead, we'll be looking to see how we can go with the minimum viable product. How can we start slow and then grow with that? How can we test that and grow with that? And what benefits that will bring for our customers? But again, I was at an event earlier this morning, so I couldn't be here, but our own Taoiseach was there, and he was talking about, the huge opportunities with social media, but also the huge potentials for risk. And so it's like that in terms of our how we use that in our working day. Again, it can be used to great benefit in terms of detecting fraud. We'll be a large payment service provider, so AI will help in terms of chasing patterns and using that intelligent engine to help you in terms of determining fraud. But likewise, on the flip side of that, it can be on the opposite side. Generative AI can be used to cause fraud within that. So again, it's something, again, hasten with caution. We can't ignore it. It's here to stay. We have to leverage it, but we have to do it in a secure manner.
And we've got a whole session, our final session is all about fraud afterwards. One thing that has come up a lot today, and I like it in this forum because it's very much about working with the private sector, so seeing as a partnership and collaboration with the private sector. And you've worked in the private sector yourself, so do you think, would you honestly, looking at kind of the NSSO and how it operates, do you think you collaborate well with tech companies, and could more be done to facilitate joint working across the public and private sectors?
Yeah, well, I would say, firstly, I'm relatively new, to the public sector, and I joined the public sector purely for that value proposition. I wanted to be involved in something that delivers value long term, and I believe the services that the NSSO does that. Do we collaborate, does the NSSO collaborate well enough with the private sector? I would say in the discussion we've just had in terms of enabling new technology to deliver better services to our customers, we are at the process now of collaborating very much in that area of the service management layer, and we're working with a number of companies just at a discovery level to determine what's the type of services out there and how could we use them. But I suppose, do we do it well? I would say, and speaking very honestly, we have found ourselves, I suppose, in the public sector in terms of the way we procure services, and because, you know, we go to market in terms of contracts, and particularly I would say in some of the technology programs that we've been involved in, there is huge constraints there in terms of those commercial contracts and the way we contract in them. I would also say, in terms of the difference between the private sector and the public sector, there is a huge fear of failure of transformation in the public sector that doesn't exist in the private sector. And it's for very good reasons, and I completely understand that. But I think there's better ways in which we could engage with the private sector. But I think the private sector in that needs to understand the nuances in dealing with public sector environment. And I think your previous speaker referenced that in terms of that. We work in a very different environment. Our raising debt rate is very, very different in terms of the private sector. It's one of the reasons, as I said, I joined it. But I think it would be very helpful in the context of us being able to leverage the evolution that's there in technology and to bring public services along in terms of that modernisation, and that I think it would be very helpful if that private sector, you know, recognition that this is a different model, it's a different business model, and there's a different way for the benefit of all citizens in which we could leverage that and collaborate in a different way.
Something about that communication and understanding on both sides, and kind of meeting in the middle. I'm really conscious of time. I know you need to get away very swiftly. So I've got one final question for you, and that is, I mentioned at the beginning that you've been in post since September last year.
I'm the new kid on the block.
You're the new kid on the block, even though you've worked in the organisation before, very different being the CEO. So just your reflections on what it's been like, and has anything surprised you despite the fact that you had worked there previously?
Should I say I get surprised every day? Probably not. Yeah, but I suppose every day is a different day. As you said, I joined the Shared Services Organisation in 2017 on the finance shared services, but I was very privileged to get the opportunity to lead the organisation as a whole, because I think the NSSO is at an inflection point, as I said, in terms of its development, in terms of where it can go and its maturity. So for the next number of years ahead, huge opportunities in terms of where we can, you know, extend our services and improve our services. I suppose my reflections have been, and we were recently at a leadership event, is that the CEO or the accounting officer role or any head of any organisation can be a very lonely role. But I would say the support that I've received, you know, from my own staff and my own leadership team has been hugely significant since I joined this role over the last number of months. And I suppose what's very obvious to me, the NSSO has three values. You know, it's people first, process and technology innovation next, and service excellence always. And in the CEO role, I recognise those on a day-to-day basis. And actually, they're so interdependent as you lead an organisation like that. So my reflection is that we are a people organisation. We provide a service. We're a people-orientated service. And we have to keep all of that moving. And to your point in terms of leveraging the collaboration with technology and advancement and generative AI, we have to do that. We have to continue the modernisation in order to prove the service, but we also have to keep the day job going. And there's a balancing act between the two of those. So it's really important, and I'm delighted to be here at an event like this. I think these events are very important, and I think they're very important for the public sector to participate in those. But it's that balancing act between keeping, you know, the operations going, but keeping that eye on the future, the eye on the prize, and continuing to develop, and that's what we'll do in the NSSO.
It's a tricky balancing act.
It is.
Bernie, thank you so much. It's such a lovely point to end on, I think, people first, because we're talking about technology, but ultimately it's all about using that technology to make the world a better place. Thank you so much, Bernie. I'm sure you'll join me in saying a warm thank you to Bernie.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.